Welcome to the LEC post-game lobby. I'm QuickShot, joined by VODS, and very soon at G2's Grabs. Just before we start, Dracos and Frostgrow, and that was one of the most fun casts I've heard in a long time. They really celebrated the craziness of the game, and I thought it was very true. Like, SK got G2'd, right?
Yeah, I mean, hey, happens to the best, happens to the worst, happens sometimes in international finals, right? Like, they summed it up nicely, and sometimes it's just one of those things you just have to accept.
There was one particular dive top where Genax was going in for the kill on Wonder, I think it was, and Dracos was just losing his mind. He was like, yes, one back for SK. I think they were down like 10k gold, down like 11 kills.
I mean, you gotta stay neutral, you know?
So, nevertheless, no surprises today. At the beginning of Ready Check, I asked a very bold question: which game was the most likely for an upset to occur? You said it was this one. VODS,
about 50% odds.
What's your takeaway from the game when you see this?
I don't think there are any takeaways from this game. Like, G2 is like, I would love to give you some great analytical insight. They beat players that they were better than, is the TLDR, I'm afraid.
They did it in a very fun manner.
I mean, for sure, and it's nice to see the creativity back.
Welcome on set,
from the man himself.
Oh, we're going to get a handshake here. This is nice. This is nice.
This is very professional, unlike some drafts that I happen to have seen on screen.
Yeah, I'll pick my battles.
Yeah.
It's quite rude not to stand up, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
So, congratulations on the win. I was just asking VODS, what are the key takeaways from this victory, from your perspective, Grabs?
I mean, this was a game like in 2019, where the players don't care. I think Perks was begging for like a minute, I want the base, don't fight. We're like, no, we don't need you. And then we run in, Perks is really annoyed, because I guess we lose here. I guess we trolled, and then we go back to the base. Don't even look at Nash, don't even look at Drakes, so I guess we had fun.
It's funny, the line the players don't care, you can interpret that in so many different ways. But when you look at the caliber of players that is on your roster, it just means they're playing loose. They know they've got an advantage that if at some point they have to like get serious, they can just win. Is that kind of what it means to you?
So we're changing a lot, not only the role swap in our team. And I think we kind of lost our ways of having fun in the game as well. We were a bit too serious. So we had a talk and said basically when I have a bit more the old spirit back, have more fun, allow ourselves to end. Because of course, if you go to World Finals, and every scrim, if you make a mistake, people take it more seriously. So the atmosphere went kind of sour for a moment, and then we talked about this, and now this game again was just like 2019. And as you said, yeah, like I think if the game would have been close at some point, then we would have been a bit better. But I think also here we get really outscaled if you make a mistake. Yeah. So I was really happy that we didn't make that many ends, but maybe against a different team, a better team, the game would be harder.
Interesting. I actually want to dive a little bit deeper on the role swap, and something you mentioned was the dynamic of the team, the nature. Earlier on Twitter, I asked some fans to suggest some questions, and this was one of them. Give me a little bit more insight into how you've had to like change the dynamics. The second role swap in a year, obviously. You started going 6-0, and now there's some struggles recently. So, how have you started to address that, and are you getting back to 2019 ways?
I think the whole struggle discussion is very funny, because first of all, motivation is a very strange thing. And this change gave us a chance to actually have something to work towards in the spring split. Because I think every big team, if you don't make changes, comes back from Worlds. And it's hard to motivate yourself to go from a best of 5 against SKT, down 1, and FPX to a best of 1 against some European teams. No offense, of course, right? But it's just hard. So we kind of thought we would struggle in the beginning. And we kind of got unlucky to be 6-0, because then suddenly it was, oh, G2 is still good, and they're going to win every game. We're like, we don't really want to. Everybody's asking about how we struggle, and we're not as good, and we're at home playing Magic the Gathering and just enjoying life, basically. But yeah, ultimately, it's just about the communication as well, because Perks talks differently than Caps does. It has some advantages, some disadvantages. Of course, Caps has to learn the new matchups. Also, we are implementing new systems, so we have a lot going on at the same time. So I think after having the talk, we dialed back a bit and take smaller steps again, because it can be overwhelming. Again, Perks, Caps learning their role again, or new systems, new communication style. We tried to be a bit more serious, but that backfired now. So I think overall I'm really happy. If you would have asked me for the split, at this point, if we were like, what are we now, 8-3?
Yes, correct.
I would have said like, awesome, I take that. I would be really happy, so.
Yeah. I mean, it pretty much corroborates what you were saying at the beginning of the day in terms of the things they've got to deal with, and the 6-0.
I mean, so I mean, I can't take all the credit, because Grabs and I have a pretty good relationship, and I reached out to him and I said, all right, so does your team just suck now? And he replied to me being like, yeah. So it's funny because if you speak to the players too and you ask them the same question, they go, yeah, I don't know if we'll beat SK today, to be honest. Like, they're obviously all having fun, but...
That explains your prediction
yeah.
now. All of a sudden,
I told
by
you,
the way.
right? But it was Grabs that pointed out to me, like, honestly, I was surprised we went 6-0, but no one else was. And I was like, that's a very interesting perspective, because to a lot of us, we all sat there and thought like, oh yeah, I mean, Perks might have a rough first week, but then he'll be back to his old form. And I mean, I've pointed out mistakes on Perks' play. There's mistakes that exist for G2. And it's great to hear from Grabs that this gives them something to keep them motivated, because I remember us having a chat afterwards where it's like, I don't know what we're going to do in spring, because, you know, how do you go from playing on the world finals against the best teams to then just going back to normal regular season best of all?
When you look at how much success this roster and these players have, your goal is the trophy, right? So it's understandable and something that you need to acknowledge is that you focus on the playoffs and get to playoffs first and then do what you got to do.
It's also really hard to remind yourself that, sure, we want to win worlds, but first we have to beat SK. We have to beat 30 first. We have to beat those teams first. Like last year, we talked about winning Split, winning MSI step by step, but now we're entering the season saying, can we win worlds?
Yeah.
So it's really, really hard to like talk about the next opponent, not forgetting that we have to first do our homework, and then we can talk about winning MSI and worlds again.
I'm going to ask you a little about the homework that you have to do, because the big talking points that we've had on broadcast is the race for first in LEC. Fnatic G2 Origin, now all tied at 8-3, with Misfits losing that game, and you can see now in the battle for fourth with Mad Lions and Rogue. Is this what you expected to see, and does this reflect the current strength of teams in Europe?
I'm surprised at Misfits. I mean, I thought they're going to be worse, way worse. So props to them, the coaching staff, the players. Shows all wrong. Besides that, I think everything seems as expected.
Did you get to see the Misfits game earlier today, by any chance?
They played again?
Fnatic.
A bit, just a bit.
I'm going to get VODS to give a brief summary of how the game went, because we do have some footage.
So they drafted Vigar Rek'Sai, and they found First Blood at level 3, and then they got another kill at level 4, and then they got another kill at level 5.
I guess Nemesis is so good that he knows he doesn't die here.
Yeah. It
goes differently then.
It was actually a massacre. Like, this whole level 1 play pretty much decided the game, because then Whipple gets red buff.
I mean, this could easily be a 2-0 for Misfits, and then the game is different, right?
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, I guess it worked out.
Grabs, can you give me a little bit more insight? Misfits go 7-0. They, finish the first half of the split, tied for first. Now in these follow-up matches, this is where you really start to understand like how good they are as a team, how strong they are. But like, what's your perspective on that? Because going 7-0, you do have to be at a certain quality bar. You can't just get lucky that many times.
No, they're good for sure, and I think they also realize they're not that good. So they're still behind us, Fnatic and Origin. They know that from talking to some of their guys, and it's good because they just take the positive wins and the feelings, but they know they have to work hard, keep improving if they want to have a shot and actually winning a best of 5 against those 3 teams. Also, like when we lost against them, I think a team should not be as close like we did to win if your D carry goes 0-9. I think like if Django doesn't step off the bush there and Insert as well, then we can win the game. So they have some flaws, they know that again, and I think they're gonna be like even better in summer. Same for Mad Lions. So I think these 2 teams have a really high ceiling, and I think in summer especially they're gonna actually be threatening. I think for now though there's a clear cut between the top 3 and the rest.
I mean, it's also interesting that he points or looks at it from that perspective, because when we think about the draft and how we've been talking about Misfits, they are typically a top-focused team, and then today they went heavily focused on playing through bot. So their attempt today could have been to try and fix some of the issues that we have been criticizing them for. And when you look at it from that perspective, it makes a little bit more sense when they got destroyed as hard as they did, because you're going against obviously one of the best bot lanes in Europe. So maybe this wasn't the best game to try it, but at the same time, regular season is a good time to try it. And if you feel that you're getting better at something, why not do it against one of the best?
And they've built that safety net, right? With their current win-loss, they're looking pretty comfortable. You can see 2 or 3 teams down the bottom of the table not likely to enter the playoff race. So, setting themselves up for success. Slightly challenging question. How much better are Fnatic than G2 right now?
They're better than us right now.
I'm asking you.
I think if they get kills in the first 5 minutes, then they win.
Okay.
If not, I think we should still be a better team. Looking at them, I don't think they changed from last year, their mid-game. I think we have a good grasp on what they want to do. And that's just how natural matchups went, right? If we inted, or I mean, we don't int it because they play well, right? They set up the ganks correctly, we don't beat them, we die. They're really good at snowballing. Like, I think by far the best team in the league in snowballing. If they get the lead, they just punish you. But I think if they don't, then even if they're better scaling comp, I think they're very telegraphed in what they want to do. I mean, the whole discussion on the Vega pick they wanted to do, like, we all team fight you front to back. Then we just don't front to back team fight, and then the game should be easier, right? And they can still improve, but I don't think they're better than us.
That's super interesting, actually, because we've made comparisons to how right now they feel very similar to, they felt more similar to 2019 G2 than G2 did, in the sense that they are drafting what the players want rather than what feels like they should be playing, and they're playing a much looser style, and it feels like that they're not playing a singular style, they're a lot more open to playing through different lanes. So
I mean,
to me, it feels like that they're way more diverse, not only in their draft, but also in their approach to the game compared to what they were last year. And I've gotten a lot more G2 vibes from them. And until this game from G2, I would have said they were more like 2019 G2 than you were. So it's very interesting to hear this perspective.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, they're really strong.
Sure.
I mean, I think also there's a gap between us two and Origin. About how do I say that correctly? I think last year, especially the summer finals and the semifinals before that, we played really bad.
I agree.
Like really, really bad, and that's why it was close. I think it's also really hard to judge on best of ones. And again, they can prove me wrong. I think it doesn't matter if they will beat us next week because it's best of one. It has to come to a best of five. I think their change of style is good for them, and they're only getting better. So I mean, they're gonna be the most challenging team for sure. I'm just saying that I don't see why they should be better than us right now. That's all I'm saying.
I can tell you right now that I am going to judge you next week in that game to decide the answer. Just setting that clear.
I mean, then I will just play like draft Pike mid and say, sorry guys, Pike mid.
Okay. So you just said you're going to draft Pike mid, right? Did you happen to see what Mickey and Perks said about your drafting before the game?
I mean, I'm hearing this for 2 years. So.
Okay. So we actually have a video that I just want to play again, and I want you to listen to Mickey interviewing Perks about what Grab's drafts sound and look like. Production may not just be ready for this, so give it a second and throw this up when you can.
Hey guys, Mickey here, and I'm here with G2's Perks, and I have one question for him. Why is Grab's draft so bad?
Well, I think it's just one of his talents. You know, every man has some hidden talents, and I think Grab just found his talent in making the worst drafts possible. I feel like he has a specific fetish to ruin the draft when it could be already good enough, but he just has to like ruin it. So I think that's just one of Grab's perks of why he's a G2's coach, and nothing more to it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and good luck with his drafts.
I absolutely love this. First of all, Mickey, great interview. Technique is flawless. Now, there's no players here, right? You have the microphone. Everyone's watching you. Normally, the power's the other way around. So what would you like to say to set the record straight?
I mean, I don't think they appreciate the training weights I give them on stage. And I think we only get better by playing through bad drafts. And I think the power-up, I mean, I tried to do it for the finals, but then Pike mid came, so I didn't do it there. But maybe this year, and then actually they have good drafts, and then we can't lose. But yeah, I think one day they will look back and realize actually it helped them a lot.
I think what you could also say is that the finals is a representation of what happens when you give them their own identity and what they want, you know?
Okay. I mean, of course, the Pike mid thing is a meme. I could talk about this for a second. So first of all, of course, we scrimmed with it. The idea was, Doomy wants to roam, Pike can give up farm, it doesn't matter, he can match.
Sure.
What he didn't do in scrims, though, is that the map was split. That means Pike can't fetch the lead, and then suddenly Wonder was alone. And like in all the scrim games we had, it didn't happen. We're like on stage, like, yeah, this doesn't work out. And then even this game we could have won, right? So first of all, yeah, there was an idea behind it. It didn't work out. Happens. If you would have won the game, then suddenly again the whole was like, oh, G2, Pike mid, they're so smart, right?
I actually love it because that's what you said to Medic as well. Like Medic was asking about the draft. You're like, well, if it wins, I'm a god. If it loses, I'm not. Like whatever, you know, just have fun.
I mean, ultimately, I think they all know that as much as it's a meme, this also gives them the chance to actually try something out, because worst case, they just say, fucking coach, sorry for the swearing, into it again, you know, and I think that's fair. And I like to give them the freedom. Ultimately, it's always a teamwork between us, right? Basically, I give basic structure, and then they can fill in the gaps. If they make a wrong decision, then I can always say, yeah,
It's actually funny because I spoke to Caps as well, and I pulled him aside and I said, hey, so this interview's coming. Grabs doesn't know. We try to keep it as much a secret as we could. What's your take? And basically Caps just said, look, at the end of the day, we have to learn from whatever mistakes we make. And if you just want to bucket it and like get rid of it out of your mind, just make it a scapegoat. Just like, hey, it was the draft. We have some fun poking at Grabs, but at the end of the way, it's just like a way to process and deal with it.
Yeah, don't trust Caps. He doesn't say these things openly. There were also some talks about a certain career mid laner that he really likes, but behind the scenes he talked about how much better he is. So he has a different perspective. I mean, I'm not saying who it is, right? But we met with some.
Okay, so
I will say that what G2 do with the drafts that they're given is impressive. And it's important to acknowledge that. And I think that it also reinforces, like, Grabs jokes about it, but the training weights joke is in many ways serious because you also then get to see where G2 fail. Because, for example, with the comp you had in week 4, where you had to dive, otherwise you'd get outscaled, you messed up your dives, and then the game...
Schalke.
Yeah, it was against Schalke, right? You then kept that game still relatively close when you should have been outscaled and you should have lost, right? And it's a situation where you have to appreciate what they can do with a bad draft, but that doesn't obviously excuse the fact that sometimes they have training weights on.
It's funny because when I look at the team, there's a chemistry, there's a bond, there's something that you can't quite put your finger on that seems to enable this, you know, like the mentality, the approach, the jokes, the just sheer skill and ability. Like you said, what they can do with a bad draft, but then what they can do with a good draft is just on a whole other level.
Oh, let's not now think that today was a good draft.
Okay. Can we talk about this definition of a good or bad draft? Because what is scaling, what is team fighting is so diverse. Like when I hear certain analysts talk about themes or colors, I mean, this is very obvious what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
It's not a flame because he has his own view in the game, and in his view, he's right.
Sure.
But the game is very complex. So for what I said, Fnatic, you look at GP, look at the Vega, like, oh, team fighting will be hard because we can't walk into them. But when we don't walk into them, we fight differently. GP,
but...
like, for example, I just think...
Go.
Because let's say a team fight, right? It's Fnatic, we are outscaling in team fights. You can say that. But also, for example, GP supposedly wins really hard against Aatrox. So, but Aatrox can still push side lane. That means he should be able to find a flank. That means the D carry can't play the game. If we walk into them as 5, of course they're going to win. But then, I don't know, just so black and white. And I'm not defending all my drafts, right? Of course, they're like, for example, against Mad Lions, after we gave LeBlanc 3 kills, we couldn't win the game anymore because we were outscaled on sides because we couldn't deal with her. Right. Also in team fights, had more utility. So there was no way to outmaneuver them. But, like, for example, you can play a team comp with 4 team fighters and 1 split pusher who can also team fight by flanking. And then I think this angle is not viewed on enough. Also from everybody, basically, broadcasters, other coaches, also me sometimes, right? I just think it's really hard to define a winning draft.
Yeah, but I will say that in my opinion, a bad draft is one where you have a very narrow win condition in which if you do not execute it perfectly, then your chances of winning the game drop dramatically. And I think that given the current state of the meta, there are a lot of, especially when Europe put a huge amount of priority on champions like Elise, where if you don't find the advantages, then you end up struggling. And I'm not saying that like there aren't comps that even if they're considered weaker on paper, that they can't still win games. Of course they can, because just because your conditions to win are harder doesn't mean that it's impossible.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there are certain comps, like how Fnatic drafted against Origin, like that was just a lost draft for Origin, just because the win conditions that they had, if they were not able to find an early game snowball, then they had no options because they couldn't play sides, they couldn't play team fight. Yeah. So that's what I define as a bad draft, one in which your win conditions are sometimes so narrow that it becomes too difficult for you to win.
No, I agree with that. And again, I'm not saying that like having themes or like how you want to play off the game is wrong.
Sure.
Like in itself, I'm not saying that at all. It's just more about certain champs, like all champs basically can play the game in a different style. And if you can't approach it in one way, you can always try to find a flank or something.
For sure.
And but I agree with you, of course. If you, for example, very, very black and white, if you lose early game and get outscaled, it's a bad draft.
Yes.
So very clear. For example, sometimes what happens in our team is we have a basic idea how the comp wants to operate.
Yep.
But then Wonder or Perk sees, okay, this champion, which is not on the same mode, let's say, works really well against those 4 champions.
For sure.
So then that means even though our comp is not coherent anymore, this one champ can 1v9 because just how the structure of the game goes, right?
Right.
So I think there goes many different things in the draft. And of course, also comes player preference, comes champion pools, comes
Also
just how you see the
ability,
game.
but also ability to do it, right? Like the decision making that you see from G2 and creating opportunities and creating win conditions where there shouldn't be is also something that changes the dynamic of the conversation. And at its core, if people are not aligned on what the definition of good draft means, everybody's judging it on different metrics, right? So you have to
That's what I'm
clarify
saying.
that.
You're right, yeah.
I have good news and bad news. The good news is we have another place where this conversation can happen, and I'm going to get Dracos to pitch you to join us on Euphoria and have this conversation because I really want to hear more. I'm very excited. Thank you so much for joining us and having some fun talking about the context. It's nice hearing players not flame you on broadcast for a change when they're live. Do you know what I mean? Anyways, look, tomorrow we turn for more action with our match of the week. It is Rogue versus Origin coming up in Game 4. Quickly for grabs, who's going to win that game and why?
Which one?
Origin.
Rogue versus Origin.
Oh my god. If Finn doesn't run it down, I think Rogue can win. Origin probably gonna go for hard scaling again. So I think Origin, because Finn is such a volatile player this season. Like either he performs really well or bad. So I think it's like 65-35 to Origin.
VODS, can you chime in?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. I've never really looked at Finn that way. I didn't think he was as volatile, but I'm also comparing him to the likes of like a Mickey and a Humanoid, who are really volatile.
The scale.
So, yeah, the scale
varies,
is different.
yeah.
But no, I think he makes a fair assessment. I would just also say that both of them are quite textbook in how they approach the game, and I just think that Origin have a slightly larger textbook than Rogue do. So.
It'll be interesting to see whatever changes will happen from 10.4 today, from today to tomorrow. Anyways, Grabs, thank you so much. I wish we'd have more time.
Thank you so much, Grabs.
That is it from us here in Berlin. There's more League of Legends coming up as LCS Academy Rush kicks off at 2 a.m. Here in the LEC, the race for first continues tomorrow. Until then, have a great night.
I'm going to stand up and shake your hand. Thank you, mate. That was